So years ago, I kind of had this crazy idea to start doing what I call GDIY profiles. And there for a while, I was enjoying doing them. And I felt that it kind of gave a nice perspective of just kind of getting your everyday average dog handler and trainer involved and kind of give their experience, make it relatable ultimately. And after a while, I actually did away with them for a little bit. And then a few listeners started reaching out after not hearing them for a while, and one in particular, my buddy Ben, he called me and asked where the profiles were. And when I kind of told him that I wasn't really getting any feedback or a response from him, he kind of made his case for the profiles. And so I brought them back, and I'm glad I did, because now, fast forward a few years, they're some of the favorite episodes of people. I get told all the time that they really appreciate the GDIY profiles, mainly because the relatability factor. You get people coming on, they talk about not just the favorite episodes or discussions that we've had on this podcast overall, but one of the questions that I ask all of them is to give me an example of something they screwed up. And it goes to show that, or hopefully it provides examples that we all screw up. We all make errors, and nobody is above screwing up and learning from those mistakes. And I've been asked a few times what, some of the mistakes that I've made. And I tell all of them, well, first I have to make mistakes before I can talk about it. But in all seriousness, I've made the same mistakes everybody else has made. I mean, we've all made the same ones in some different way, shape, or form. But there was one I can't shake right now because it's still kind of fresh and new. But a few weeks ago, I was actually out hunting, and I made a mistake, and I thought that this would be a good one to shed some light on and discuss and kind of tell you guys what happened. But the story goes is what happened when I was in Georgia. I was bobwhite quail hunting down in Georgia. Beautiful, what you would expect, the pine savannas and just the undergrowth and hunting these little palmetto thickets. It was gorgeous. It was perfect setting. I was excited to do it. Quinn, my young setter, she hadn't had a quality bobwhite contact yet. And so me and my buddy Randall, we go out there. He has his Poodle Pointer Creek out. I put Quinn down, and then I also put Rachel down. And Quinn I haven't really run with other dogs up until this point, and so Rachel's never even been on the ground with Quinn either. So really, I've only run Quinn solo. But we go out there, we're hunting, they're doing everything that they're supposed to do, and then the collar goes off. I get the notification, Quinn on point, 140, 150 yards away, something like that. And so Randall and I start heading that way. Well, we finally get up to her. We see her on point. She held the entire time, did exactly what you wanted her to do, did perfect. As we're coming up, I see Rachel kind of cast around her. She should have seen her. I can't say for sure that she did see Quinn, but normally I don't have this problem or concern with Rachel coming up on a back, and so I watch her kind of do a wide circle, a wide loop, and she comes back around. Well, I'm getting ready because we're still approaching Quinn on point, and I'm like, all right, well, if Rachel comes back around, this is a perfect opportunity for me to get a correction on Rachel, just using the e-collar to cue her to stop. I don't have to verbalize it, I don't have to yell it, and I can just make sure that she doesn't screw up this contact and this sequence for Quinn, who found the birds. And so the entire thing that I'm doing with Rachel, she should know better, but I'm going to reinforce it and make sure that she does stop and back and honor Quinn. And she starts getting a little closer. And so I hit the e-collar button. And unfortunately, I hit the wrong button. And instead of correcting Rachel, Quinn got a surprise touch on the collar, which caused her to jump, which then caused the birds to flush, which then caused rush shots from myself and Randall, of which we did not hit them, and so we did not get the birds. And there's a lot to kind of unpack on this. Randall, afterwards he was kind of laughing at me just because I was beating myself up over it. But few considerations on all of this. Number one is The e-collar pressure, I don't have the e-collar set up that high. I really have it set up just high enough to catch their attention. I rarely ever use it when actually out hunting. I use the Garmin Alpha 200, I think it is. And up until recently, I've always had the handheld up tethered up on my chest area. So I'm familiar with the buttons when it's up high on my strap. I always have the right button is Rachel, R for Rachel, easy to remember. The left button is either Quinn or Lucy, whoever's on the ground. I've never really hunted with all three of them on the ground, so I don't really have that worry. The middle button is always my screen lock, on and off, so that I'm not accidentally hitting buttons or changing the view or something when I don't realize it. So that being said, I only say that because I recently moved it to where it is now hanging down and attached to my little D-loop on my waist belt for my Finerise system. So the buttons were upside down, different configuration. So what I thought was I was hitting the right button for Rachel, I hit the left button for Quinn. And it wasn't so much that the pressure was too high for her that caused her to jump and yelp slightly to scare the birds. Really, it goes back to the training with her, to where she's never received a correction from me with the birds on the ground with the system. And the method that I primarily used with her is the West method. One of the key elements of that method is you don't correct the dog until the birds are in the air. So like, she has never felt an e-collar stimulus with birds on ground while she's on point. I don't even give her a whoa or any of that stuff. Everything is done after the flush. It's associated with the birds flying. And so obviously she wasn't prepared for it. She jumped at it. Birds flew off. We didn't get it. And, I say all this, somebody's like, well, why, that sucks, it happens, but, why I tell the story is a few reasons on this is, number one, I want everybody to realize that, like, we all are human. We all make mistakes. This was 100% my error. There's a reason why I hit the wrong button, but ultimately it boils down to just an excuse. I should have just double checked and did a sanity check and made sure I had my finger on the correct button. I had plenty of time, but I just assumed that I was doing it correctly. The second one of which, the second reason why I share this with everybody is to kind of highlight the fact of, yeah, the sequence messed up. We didn't get the win. She didn't get the bird in her mouth. Mission failure in a lot of ways. But what she did after that, she was surprised. She was shocked a little bit, and the birds got away. She did not care at all. She did. She literally just went off hunting, looking for more birds. And this is the main point I want to say, because I get quite a few buddies and listeners that'll text or email me, and they will put so much emphasis on one instance, good or bad. If they mess up something on a training session, then they think they ruin their dog for life, or they go out and they have the world's best rep of something they've been working for, and they think that their dog is solid on that and they never have to work it again. So it kind of goes both ways. But I just wanted to highlight the fact that the dog's genetics, the drive that we've built into them, you're not going to, don't make it a bigger deal than what you have to. I can say with 100% certainty that Quinn, five seconds after that instance, she had forgotten about it. She did not care at all. Meanwhile, here I am a few weeks removed from it, and it's still in the back of my mind, and it's ultimately, feel a certain level of guilt, but ultimately it comes from, like, I do this for the dogs. She did her job. She did everything right. And unfortunately, I screwed up, and she did not get the reward because of my actions. And so that's why I feel bad. But I can't, some people will actually take that guilt or the emotions and project that onto their dogs and beat themselves up unnecessarily for it. And it's obviously still with me. But I'm trying to, obviously just put it back behind me. Let's move forward. It's not affecting the dog. But it doesn't mean that it doesn't stick with you, right? Your dogs do perfect, and the mission fails because of your actions. And so I just wanted to share that with everybody. Is over the years, everybody says that that's their favorite part about the profiles, specifically, is learning that they aren't the only ones that make these mistakes. And I guarantee you there's somebody listening to this right now that needed to hear somebody else made that mistake, to where you accidentally hit the wrong button or at the wrong time, or too high of intensity, too low of intensity, whatever. On my Garmin Alpha system, I have the e-collar settings at, I think it's a too low. I mean, it really is just enough to catch their attention, because, again, I very rarely ever use it while hunting. But it is what it is. I just thought that was a good story to share with you guys, and hopefully, it helps somebody along the way. But, whether it's good or bad, if it's a one-off instance, if it's just a one-off thing, don't get too caught up into it either way. My buddy Garrett, talking to you specifically, don't worry too much about one little off training rep or anything. I know that you probably needed to hear that. But yeah, so moving on, this week's episode was the training mindset episode, and this was something that I've been wanting to cover in some way, shape, or form for a while now, because what I've noticed over the years is more often than not, how a training session goes, or how I feel after the training session wraps up, is more reflective of my mindset going into it, how focused I am going into it, how disciplined and just anticipatory, and how much essentially how the training session goes to plan, right? Yesterday I had one of those training sessions that makes you feel like hanging out a shingle, opening up for business, calling yourself a pro trainer. All 3 dogs just crushed it, didn't have a single bad rep. My mind was 100% laser focused in everything, timing. It was just one of those. I wish that I had a video camera on, because they don't come around too often, to where all 3 dogs and myself, I'm my own worst critic. I will figure out something to hammer and address in my own performance, or whatever you want to call it. And it was just one of those days that I left the training field just on cloud 9. There was nothing I felt like could have been improved on my part. I don't think that the girls could have done anything better. And it kind of got me thinking, like, I wonder if, because the girls did that, they had that perfect game, if you will, because I had the correct mindset. I went out there and I had the right focus and I had the right plan. And I wonder how many times that we leave the field thinking that the dog struggled, or they missed something, or they just didn't perform up to the standard that we were hoping for. I wonder how much of that is because maybe we're not keyed in correctly on the mental side of things. And it's just kind of reflective of some of the things that Mark and I discussed in this episode. And I know I got a few messages from some people that really enjoyed the talk and the reminder, to where, just something as simple as going into it and reminding yourself to talk less. The verbal aspect of that, as we said in the episode, is probably one of the most common errors or mistakes that people make when they go out training, is they just talk too much. We're verbal creatures, dogs aren't, yada, yada, yada. You'll actually hear a little bit about that on next week's episode as well. I'm excited for you guys to hear next week's episode. But yeah, it was just a really good reminder. I wanted to touch on this and just kind of remind everybody that you can have the best setup, you can have the best plan, you can have the correct dog for the correct situation. But if you aren't into it mentally, and you aren't focused, and you're not approaching it the correct way, it may not matter. In the end, you may not teach what you're hoping to teach, or the dog comes away with the lesson that you're hoping it comes away with. So take that for whatever it's worth. With all that being said, I think I have received quite a bit more feedback and questions in the past week or so than normal. So everybody a few weeks ago must have, you guys heard that my request is bring it to me, be engaged with the show, be engaged with the process, and you folks are listening. So I appreciate it. I did get 2 pieces of listener feedback in regards to a conversation that myself and my buddy Randall had last week discussing some of the pheasant stocking programs. So I'm going to go ahead and hop into that right now. The first of which is from Connor Callahan from Instagram. He wrote in, I just finished up listening to the Hanging Outro episode. The last 20 minutes was interesting. I live in southeast Nebraska, and we have a pheasant stocking program. They stocked approximately 16,500 across the state in 2 seasons, one for youth season and one right before Thanksgiving. Last year they didn't have the birds for it, and I saw maybe 10 hunters all year. This year they stocked them, and I saw 4 to 5 trucks every single weekend. It definitely artificially inflated the number of hunters. And where I'd find good wild quail numbers last year, I couldn't find any birds because the whole covey got shot up. So I don't mind stocking for the youth season, but that's where I draw the line. So a few considerations in that, and one of which kind of goes into the next one, which we'll talk about here in a second. But that is one element of what I was saying on these whole stock programs or specific areas and WMAs that have these programs. It is going to focus that hunting pressure into one area. So while the main thing might be the pheasant stocking program that brings everybody in there, I don't want to call it bycatch, but the other opportunities by extension that brings people there. Somebody wants to go shoot pheasant, but they happen upon some quail, they're going to shoot the quail. So if you're putting a spotlight on a specific area for one species, that doesn't mean that it's not going to have a negative impact on other species within that area. And one thing I would like to say in all fairness is, Connor, this is anecdotal evidence. This is your experience. So, it might be that the birds are down from last year. Could be that they just moved on or weather conditions. There's a lot of other context to this that you could talk about or bring into the discussion. But, it's hard to argue with, if you're finding birds this year, all of a sudden something brings out a whole lot more hunting pressure the following year, and all of a sudden they're gone. Might be something to consider. But remember, correlation doesn't always equal causation, so just keep that in mind. But it is a consideration for this. I'll save the next point after I read the next comment. Paul Hallberg on Instagram once again, he wrote in, Hey Nick, I really enjoyed listening to your interview with Nate Kennedy. I had the pleasure to meet him for the first time at the New York RGS benefit hunt. I didn't realize this was his first dog and was mostly a deer hunter. I also enjoyed both yours and Randall Lyken's comments on your subsequent podcast about the listener in Pennsylvania that mentioned the loss of wild pheasants from our state from about the mid-1990s. The Pennsylvania Game Commission and Select Pheasant Forever chapters worked together to establish a wild pheasant recovery program from 2008 to 2019, which included trap and transporting wild pheasants from South Dakota and Montana to 4 areas in the state to restore habitat and a reproducing population. 1 out of the 4 still has some wild pheasants. These were all closed to hunting for years, but more recently opened for youth hunts by a lottery system. The Pennsylvania Board of Game Commissioners gave preliminary approval to the Game Commission's executive director to decide whether the WPRAs would be open for rooster-only hunting. I would prefer they keep it closed to allow bird dog owners to train their dogs on wild pheasants. So the common thread between both of those pieces of feedback from both Connor and Paul, neither one of them are saying do away with the program at all. Both of them are kind of in for it with a few concessions. Connor says he's okay keeping it for the youth season. Paul says that he's on board with it as long as it remains like a dog training only thing. He didn't really specify anything on the youth, but I think it goes to show while 2 different perspectives within kind of the same region or area, they both kind of come at it from the same way, to where they're not saying do away with all of it together, but let's keep it to where, it's a little bit more valuable than just giving the hunting population in general another option to go shoot birds, be it for the youth or be it for being able to develop your dogs on wild birds like that. I think both of those are pretty good quality considerations, and something to keep your mind or keep your eye out for. If a state is considering or asking for input in their pheasant stocking program, or maybe they're considering doing a new program and they're looking for some feedback or something, think about that. I think that it doesn't have to be black and white in all of these programs to where it's, you're either for or against it. Both of these guys are kind of for it, if for the right reasons. And I think more or less, I think the upland community overall reflects that a little bit more, to where you don't hear too many guys that are just that, painted in their corners on a lot of these topics. Is there's a lot more consideration to it. So I thought that was interesting and thought that was worth noting. So I appreciate both of their feedback on that. And so if you have anything to add on the pheasant stocking topic, this is 2 or 3 episodes in a row we've kind of touched on it in some regard. So if there's some more to consideration, then by all means. I did receive a few feedbacks on this week's episode on the mental side of things. My buddy Scott Canane, he wrote in on YouTube with a long feedback session that I thought is worth reading, though. So Scott, he wrote in again on YouTube. Wow, this conversation generated a ton of thoughts. I'll include a couple here. First, why is it I do not hear many, if any, trainers talk about the importance of building a strong relationship with your dogs? It feels as all training boils down to picking a method, sticking with that method, be consistent, and put your dog on birds. I've been an educator, a coach, and a dog trainer, and if I can build a strong relationship with the ones I'm trying to teach, everything seems to go better. Second, everyone I come across that truly appears to be having a great time in the field, regardless of birds, weather, or shooting, has a great relationship with their dogs. When we pull into a spot and they're getting the pup ready to go, the tail is wagging, the eyes are fixed on the trainer, there is some small talk around having fun. The dog is not trying to jump off the tailgate, it stands there just wanting to go out and have fun, but most of all, the pup wants to please the owner. Third, that desire to please, in my opinion, makes all your training days and all your days of field so much more enjoyable. When you see that look in their eyes that says, look what I did, and that tail is wagging and they can't wait to come and show you what they got, now that makes for great days. Last, thank you both for having this conversation. The mindset that you have with your pup, that your pup has with you, makes life so much more enjoyable. I can't tell you how many times that the pups I have just stop during a hunt just to take a breath, scratch an ear or two, have a little snack, talk about what a good pup they are before we move on again. I will say, and this is not sexist, just an observation, that women appear to have the strongest bonds and relationships with their pups. No yelling, no slumped shoulders on a busted bird. Instead, I hear the singing to the dog while they are hunting, the singing that the dog handlers of the South wrote and bragged about. So take some time, get in the right mindset, and have fun, whether training or hunting. And a lot of that, I mean, there's really nothing to add too much to that. All good points. Just trying to, what I referenced in the episode was trying to keep the soul, keep it fun. Remember what we're out there after, trying to build that relationship with our dogs. But one thing I did notice is his reference to women and their seemingly more, shared relationship with the dogs and the stronger relationship and bond and the examples he gave why. There's a couple common themes and considerations from this episode and prior that he reflects in this, and I don't know if Scott really meant to do this or not, but when he talks about the no yelling, no slumped shoulders on a busted bird, them singing to the dog, keeping the energy up or whatever, a lot of that is what we were discussing this episode is, the body language. The dogs pick up on your energy. They're going to pick up on the tone of which when you're using, when you're verbalizing anything. The singing is an interesting piece, especially, his reference to the Southern dog trainers of yesteryear. And it's interesting living down in the South. I've been told by plenty of guys, sing to your dog. And if you ask why, they more or less can't even tell you why. It's just they were taught to sing to the dogs. If they do give you a reason, more often than it's not, that it helps the dog keep track of you, or you can push them out or rein them in or have them turn left or have them turn right. To me, that's kind of a traditional thing, and some people love it. I prefer quiet in the field. Singing to your dog or not, it's your dog. Do what you want. But more or less, what really kind of stood out to me in that comment was him noticing the body language. And I have to ask, is that maybe why they seem to have a stronger relationship or bond with their dogs, because their body language allows that to kind of take hold? Something to consider. Be interested in y'all's thoughts on that. But yeah, so that kind of does it on the feedback portion. Of course, I did receive more questions on certain topics. One of which is Joe Lucas wrote this in via email, and I think this might be the only question that I'm going to touch on here today. But he wrote in a few weeks ago, "Hey, GDIY, big fan. I've been skipping through episodes on drives, and the podcast has given me some great things to think about as I train my first upland dog, a 7-month-old Deutsch Draughtar. Is there an episode or episodes you'd recommend that covers bells? I've been running a bell in training. I have a GPS for safety, but like to use the bell for primary position awareness. But today was our first day chasing wild quail, and I couldn't stop imagining those little guys just running away from the sound in the South Texas brush. I understand a beeper or GPS may give you more range, so I'm a little more curious about the debate on bells' impacts on the birds. Thanks for any episode pointers. I love what you're doing." This was actually my first season on bells. This was something that I, for one, wasn't really keen on using bells for the longest, mainly because, back to the previous comment with Scott and the singing, I personally appreciate silence in the woods. I do. I don't want to go out. I don't want to hear somebody hacking their dog nonstop. I prefer not to listen to a bell or beeper collar going off all the time, especially if it's not on point mode. So it took me a while to really kind of warm up to the potential aspect of using a bell, and but I did add it to my program this year and how I hunted. But it's only going to be used, and I have only used it so far in the rough grouse woods, where the cover's thick. I need that kind of instantaneous feedback that I can't see with my eyes. I need to know if my dog's relocating. And so I found that, this was through experience of hunting with other grouse hunters that are a little bit more successful or have more experience. And a couple buddies, my buddy Nick Larson at the Birdshot podcast, he really kind of started keying me in on the bell conversation, because if you're not interested in bells, you don't really look into them. You don't realize that there's all kinds of different bells out there that have all kinds of different tones and pitches. Some are louder, some are softer, some are higher pitch, some are lower pitch. And so there are some really nice bells that aren't just a ringing, church bell going through the woods the whole day, which is what I was kind of opposed to. So he kind of turned me on to these Warner Genuine Swiss bells. What I got is a size 10 medium, but I got two of them essentially. I've got one on the collar, and then they come with these little leather straps. And this is something, again, if you don't use bells or you haven't been around them, you don't really know. You don't know what you don't know. And the leather straps that came on the bells, I originally just put the collar through the leather strap. And what I found was it caused the bell to dangle really too low. And so when the dogs would run, unless the bell was up behind their heads, their legs would come up and their wrist or forearm, whatever you want to call it, would hit the bell. and it would leave, a little scab or scar or scratch or whatever. It would break the skin, and then you're dealing with an injury. And you don't want your dogs getting all scratched up and tore up. I mean, they're already hammering the brush enough as it is. We don't need to be adding our own little uh, troubles to it. So I really wasn't aware of what was doing it initially, and then I can't remember who it was, but they told me to cut the leather off the bell and just attach the bell directly to the collar without that extra couple inches on the leather adding to it, so it doesn't hang down, and that fixed the problem. And so instead of the leather, it's attached right there to the collar itself, and it's I mean, it doesn't stick out any further than the actual collar piece. So that was a good learning curve or consideration for me. As far as bells and beeper collars causing birds to run or push away, this is a debate or consideration that's not leaving the upland space anytime soon. It's something that since I've been in this world, you got people that just they swear up and down that the birds, it doesn't do anything. It doesn't spook them. It doesn't scare them. It doesn't cause them to run. Then you have some other people that swear up and down that if the birds hear one chink of a bell that they're taking off. I don't really know if there's any really good way to decide on that or not. You kind of have to make up your mind on that, how much stock you want to put into it. Where I personally land on it is, if even if it does have some level of causing uneasiness on the birds, I don't think that it is enough to discount the overall benefit of having a bell on in the rough grouse woods. And again, that instantaneous feedback of what that dog is doing, if it's moving, if it's relocating, whatever, to me, that is much more valuable than on the opposite side of the spectrum of it being detrimental to causing birds to run. And the reason why I feel like I can say that is, I've seen enough dogs to where you get them on enough birds and they get enough experience, they will learn to work running birds and they can relocate. So even if a bird takes off running, yeah, I mean, yeah, you can say that the bird will go run and pitch out somewhere and you never see it again, possibly, but you also have no idea if that's what really happened. And so to me, like, trusting that my dog is going to establish point, and then when I get up to it and I enter the game, so to speak, and I can concentrate on just waiting on that flush, just looking for the bird, because I know if the dog starts moving or relocating, that bell is going to tell me how it's moving. It's kind of like you're working in a team a lot better than if I'm constantly trying to look back at the dog, look for the bird just because everything is silent. And that's how I hunted for years. And, both provided success. I was successful with a bell and without a bell. And I can say where I stand now, I prefer the bell in the woods. Now, I'm not a fan of the bell or beeper collars out on the prairie. I don't really necessarily feel like it's necessary, especially if you have a tracking collar on. You know, you're in the prairie. Most of the time it's flat. I mean, I know there's some rolling hills and you can lose sight of them, but if you're on large flat, grasslands out in South Dakota and you can see 300-400 yards and your dog's only ranging, 100 yards, I don't really think that you need a bell or a beeper, but again, each their own. I'm not going to sit here and say it's going to do a disservice to you, but that's kind of how I operate. Is if I'm out there on the prairie, I'm just taking the bell off, and then that way I don't have to hear it. I don't think that it provides me any kind of great benefit out there because you can see everything so well already. Another thing that I found interesting is all my dogs except for Rachel took to the bell. Again, this was the first year that I've used a bell. I introduced it last training season, thinking that okay, let's get them used to it on training situations, and Rachel seemed to do okay with the bell. But what was interesting is when we actually got up into the North Woods and it was time to actually hunt, she refused to hunt with the bell. And it took me a couple outings of her just not running like her normal self to start figuring out like what was throwing her off. I mean, she wasn't searching, she wasn't ranging, she just wasn't hunting as hard, and I couldn't figure out why. And so finally, after a few outings, 3 or 4, I started asking like, all right, well, what is different this outing? What is different on this trip than in trips in the past? And the only thing I could come up with was the bell. So I just to check it off the list. I wasn't even really sold that was it, but like, all right, well, it takes 5 seconds to figure this out. So I called her over, took the collar off, slid the bell off, put the collar back on, and boom, she's out hunting like she normally does. So she did not respond well to the bell. And could I make it? Could I force her to use it? I mean, yeah, I'm sure I could, especially with the time in the off season. But you got to kind of ask yourself sometimes: is it really worth the hassle? This is something that she's been hunting 9, 10 seasons, however old she is at this point. She's hunted 9 or 10 years without a bell, and then all of a sudden it's like, here's a bell. She just didn't want to use it, and I don't really feel strong enough either way to really kind of force her to have to use that. So but Lucy, handful of seasons under her belt, bell didn't phase her. Quinn, she's a freaking bird drunk crazed lunatic when it comes to hunting. I think you could put a freaking atomic bomb on her, and that noise isn't even gonna phase her from trying to find other birds. But Rachel, that is a consideration, to where if you're considering using a bell or a beeper collar and your dog's gone years without using it, make sure that you do it in the training field first, get them used to it, and just see how they respond. Again, she responded better in the training field than she did on actual rough grouse with it. So just something to keep in mind. Another consideration, as far as if we're talking the bells and beeper collars, I kind of just naturally threw in the beeper collars because it's kind of the same concept, is what the beeper collars. Again, if it's not on point mode, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to listen to a forklift backing up in the woods all day long. And if you're the fan of beeper collars, I'm not. Again, it's your hunt however you want to hunt. The best way I've personally seen beeper collars utilized was in tandem with the bell. So obviously, instead of having a beeper collar going off the entire day in the woods like some forklift, just turn it to either point only, or the best way I've seen it used is they turned it off altogether to where they could just use the locate button. And I'm specifically talking about Tim Perkins, who I did an episode with years ago, Wisconsin taxidermist, great pointers. It was a lot of fun linking up and seeing him in the rough grouse woods, but he would run a bell so you could keep track of the dog while it's running through the woods. But obviously when a dog establishes point, that bell goes quiet. Well, you need something else. Well, instead of just having the beeper just going off the whole time while the dog's on point, he utilized it to where he chose when and where to hit the locate button. And so, he would go a little ways, hit the locate, and then he would keep going. So he was kind of trying to meet in the middle on his concern, whether the noise pushes birds away or not. And so I thought that was a really interesting way to use it. And this is a way that, I don't remember. I don't think he had a tracking collar on at that point. I think he just had the beeper collar and the bell, so a little more old school, but really effective. And I mean, he had it down pat to where he got the benefits of the bell and keeping track, and he had a really high pitched bell for his pointers that were ranging a little further, and so he could keep track of where it was at and then locate it and go from there. Another consideration with the beeper collar is the tone. Do you want to use the beep, or do you want to use the screech owl or hawk or whatever? Again, this kind of goes to you, how much stock you put into it. I personally don't think that a bird is going to sit there and hold any better just because your beeper collar on the dog that's pointing at the bird is screaming like a hawk, rather than, just a beep. I think that some of these beeper collars have quail tones as well. I don't think, a ruffed grouse is going to hold any better because it hears a bobwhite quail that it has no idea what it is up in the north woods than the bell or beeper or whatever. So again, each their own. You figure out, if it provides. This is where I land on a lot of stuff. I think most importantly, you have to hunt with your setup confidently. So you have to have the confidence in your setup. So whether I agree with it or disagree with it doesn't matter ultimately. You're the one going out in the woods with your dog. So if it provides you comfort, if you think that it gives you just, a 10% increase in likelihood of a successful outing or hunt, that confidence of mind is much more important than my opinion on this show, right? So anything that I say right now, just kind of take it with a grain of salt. I'm kind of giving you my personal opinions on it. But if you're listening to this and you're like, you swear that screech owl or screech hawk on a beeper collar gives you some sort of tangible benefit, then roll with it. Your peace of mind is much more important than my opinion. And everybody's had success with this stuff over the years and decades, or else they wouldn't be doing that. So I know that was kind of a long answer for something like on bells, but it's definitely not going away. The debate on whether bells or beepers are a benefit or takes away the likelihood of you finding success. But it's also kind of those fun topics that we like to debate ad nauseum and discuss till the end of time. But again, whatever floats your boat, whatever gets you excited and kind of gives you that confidence, that's where I stand on the bells at least. So yeah, I have a lot more questions and feedback that we'll get to in future weeks. This weekend, I'm actually as soon as I get off here, I'm gonna load this up for YouTube and the podcast release and everything, and then I got to pack all this junk up, and I'm hitting the road. I got to go to South Carolina. I'm going to be judging the St. Hubert's trial that Bird Dog Society is putting on. Excited to do that. It's going to be a lot of fun meeting a lot of new people and getting to share a weekend with everybody that loves to do what I love to do with the dogs and everything. So it's going to be exciting stuff. And last night we did a Zoom room, Patreon Zoom room. I think it was probably the best Zoom room we've had over the years through Patreon. A lot of participants, a lot of back and forth conversation. It was perfect. I had a blast, and it really makes me want to do some more of them. I can't say how often we're going to do it. I don't think it's going to be an every month type of thing. Probably more realistically every month. Kind of considering right now, sometime like early mid-March, do a follow-up one to kind of kick off the training season, quote unquote. I know some people hate when you distinguish the difference between training season and hunting season. But yeah, so sometime in March, if you want to make sure that you catch that and that announcement, then consider signing up for Patreon, patreon.com/gundogityourself. All patrons do get a few more discount codes, some opportunities to win something like an Onyx Hunt Elite membership giveaway, some bonus episodes here and there. But we did just get hats in, and they do get a discount for hats. So, we have 6 or 7 different hats on the website now. So if you want some GDIY hat for training season, or get you that nice blaze orange hat for hunting season, go check it out. Just yesterday, I got a call and finalized some plans. I've been asked by a few listeners over the past few weeks if I'm going to be attending Pheasant Fest or not. And I kept telling them, there for a while it looked like I was, then it looked like I wasn't. Well, right now I am going to be there. I am going to be at the Eukanuba booth. I'm going to be hanging out with the Eukanuba folks, and we're going to be doing some podcasting on site and stuff like that. So if you're going to be at Pheasant Fest, then by all means stop at the Eukanuba booth. I'll have the booth number in future episodes to kind of let you guys know. But maybe stop by, do a quick video profile or, tell your favorite hunting story or something like that. We'll kind of figure out what that looks like. But just wanted to throw that out there. Thanks again, as always, for hitting download and play. If you don't mind, hit that share button, shoot that link or this episode or any of the episodes that you prefer and got something out of. Share it with a friend. And again, we'll talk soon, and I'll be back out with another episode here in a few days. Appreciate it, guys.